Out here, there are certain nights when you just get this feeling that some psycho killer is gonna chop you up into a million little pieces. Oh, I like that feeling.
So I got to see this at the Cannes Film Festival.
Oh, you did?
I did, and it was crazy because I absolutely did not know what I was in the mood for. I saw the TV glow, and I have a feeling like even someone like you with your career, when you get an email or say that this script is coming, you have to ask yourself a lot of questions because Jane asked a lot of you in this movie. So how did it come to you, and was there ever a gut check moment on it?
It came to me in the normal way of, you have an offer for film that's coming, and I was familiar with TV Glow. I immediately fell in love with the script. But then when I had a Zoom call with Jane and fully understood the visuals and the tone that they were after for it, and that they were using some of the same crew that they had used, some of the same team that they had used for TV Glow, it felt like something that was potentially going to be important and maybe even profound. And I was interested in being a part of that journey. At the same time, I have teenage children and needed to, in the same way that I did with sex education, just, it takes a beat of, this is a conscious decision that I am making to expose an aspect of myself or expose or participate in something that will be seen by my children, no doubt. And am I fully on board before I say yes?
Oh,
and
so that's the gut check. I see.
Yeah, I think so. With a lot of, same to, I put out a book in the last few years about, anonymous sexual fantasies written to me by women around the world. And anytime I think, if you've got kids who are starting new schools like they were at the beginning of sex education or et cetera, and I have two of my kids are boys, it feels like the right thing to ask the question of oneself. And then it has become important for me to, in order to help to normalize the concepts, the conversations, the dialogue, the reality for other human beings on the planet, it feels like a good thing for me to step into without shame and fear, and hopefully bring other people along with me in that process.
Well, it's
sorry, that's a very long answer to your question.
No, but that's like a very detailed answer that I loved every minute of it, and I want to go back to so many portions of it. But the part I particularly want to go to is your book that you talked about, which we may have read, which I thought was so cool because, let's be real, most women that I know talk about you being like their bi-awakening, between you and the Mulder and Scully of it all. Which one do you want? Both, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm interested for you, looking back on it now, and I don't know, it's you've become such an icon with it. Does stuff like this now make you feel more emboldened to do stuff like sex education and this kind of stuff? Was being what you were at that time and being somebody that was the object of affection to now play a final girl with a director muse, or does that inspire you a little bit more, you think, or is it just who you were?
I think it's been a long journey for me. It was, I don't think I fully embraced, I knew the impact that Scully had on both women in STEM and essentially bi-curious or gay women. And I don't think I took ownership of that in any way, or I would, it would be mentioned to me. I would say, yes, I know. We'd have some light conversation about it. But I think through having played Jean Milburn and Stella Gibson in The Fall, who is bisexual, and Jean is incredibly open and compassionate and understanding and non-judgmental, and you just feel like you could talk to her about pretty much anything. The mixture of those two characters have really, the experience of playing them and the conversations I've had after the fact, during press and with individuals, are actually probably the reason why the idea of the book was brought to me. And because of those characters, I understood why it was important that I be the one to do a book like that. And it's just then started to inform everything, and has then also led to this moment of being a part of this film. And I understand where I fit into it. One, having been, in Jane's psyche for some time since the X-Files, but also, the wider conversation that I've been having around pleasure and desire and a certain openness and acceptance of the self and sexuality has become kind of part of, I don't even know how to refer, my world, my everything.
That's your everything.
My everything.
Girl, and we are living for everything. Let's just say. No, this film, I think what's interesting with it, as we talk about desire, that at the beginning, it's a director desiring this muse to provide them what they want to do. And then by the end, it is this like Bonnie and Clyde symbiotic relationship. I'd be curious what conversations you and Hannah sort of had when y'all were getting into this together, because it feels like, unless you and her were the most, almost like, literally like you would have to assume, sort of like what she had with Jane on Hacks. Like if y'all don't have that, this movie doesn't work. So I'm curious how y'all set that up, or maybe she knew.
I think a lot of it is Jane, but you're right, it doesn't always happen, and it didn't have to happen on this film. And with these characters, we, Hannah and I immediately just kind of fell into a rhythm of, it feels very familial somehow. I think we're, and I did a post recently of the two of us at different stages of our career where we actually look very similar as well. So there's something familial in that sense as well that I'm sure plays into it. But I don't know, you can't make that stuff up. You can't pretend that it's there when it's not. So whether it was Jane having an instinct for it or it's not acted, where it just, we got a good vibe.
You got to feel it. The other thing is it talks about, obviously, so in this you play a reclusive former star of a cult following horror movie, and you were the final girl, and Hannah's character is the director that's trying to do a sequel, and she decides that you're going to be the muse to make it happen. Because of that, I have to ask, what's your horror relationship like? Because I would wonder if you even had that much experience with final girls before you got to play one.
I didn't have a lot of experience. I am a big true crime fan, but not horror, not slasher. I had an unfortunate, when I was a teenager, I had an unfortunate experience with some very strong marijuana, and at somebody else's house that I couldn't leave. And they put on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I had a really horrific experience. And so that was it wasn't the end of my pot smoking back then, but it was the end of my horror watching. Thanks. And that kind of extends to today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, then I won't ask you who your favorite final girl is, but I will ask you this. I'm curious because I've watched your theater performance in Streetcar Named Desire, which I really loved.
Thank you.
And as much as she is her own character in her own voice, I feel parts of what you put in Blanche in your character. Is that true? Because I feel like there's parts of that Southern accent, not the same, not at all. That is a theater performance. This is different.
I mean, obviously, I tried very much not to have similarities. My intention was to do a very different regional Southern. And also their heartbreak and their need for connection is very, very different. I think Blanche is, her whole modus operandi is to find the savior. And that's how she's been raised, and that's also where her addiction has taken her. And I feel like Billy is much healthier. She's processed a lot of her stuff and is acting less out of need for affirmation than Blanche, and is somehow less vulnerable, even though, I mean, one of the reasons why I chose to do Southern is because it has so much vulnerability in it and strength at the same time. That's what I was going to say.
I felt the weak strength between the two voices. That was what made me similar. And the difference between her is I'm like, oh, you're the mastermind using it like bait, whereas with Blanche, she was just like a victim to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool.
Thank you.
I did want to talk about some other stuff from your filmography, which I think is really great, and specifically The Fall, because as much as that got, I think, a lot of attention, I don't think it nearly did as much as it is. Like, just your opening, that's one of the greatest character introductions that you will ever, like, she just walks in, you know what I mean? And then by the end of the episode, she's had, like, a lover and this, and I'm just like, girl, this is it. I'm curious, is that the one that folks come up to you that you're like kind of jazzed about? Because I feel you have so many hits in your filmography that there's probably ones that you look at and you're like, but that's a cool person, they saw that.
Yeah, I mean, it first came out in the UK, and it had a big, a lot of attention in the UK. And it was sometime, I think it was only when Netflix then launched it in the States that it then felt like it was more than just the island of the United Kingdom that was properly paying attention. And so it's had a few different lives and iterations in terms of its fandom. But it was really important to me at the time, an incredibly important character for me to have an opportunity to play, and I really loved being her, and I felt like she taught me a lot too. I felt like I learned a lot from her, and I was very excited for her to be out in the world for women. I remember when I first started doing press for it before it came out, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why that would be the case. And it wasn't until afterwards when people saw it then that they were like, oh, that's interesting. It's hard. She's so enigmatic and complex, in a complicated, not straightforward way. But I really, really, really enjoyed playing her, and still feel that it's an example of some of my strongest work, I think.
Well, that's saying something, because Mrs. Thatcher, man. Let's talk about her. But I actually want to talk about one that I think everyone's asking you about right now, and that is the X-Files and what Ryan's doing. I don't want to ask you about that. I know you can't say anything because they keep you whatever secret. But you have had conversations with Ryan, and where he has done nothing but mostly either the Marvel stuff or his own original work. I'm interested, what's it like working with him in this television format, one?
I mean, it was incredibly flattering. I'm such a fan of his work and his brain, and I felt really honored to have those conversations. And it's always amazing to talk with a fan who really understands cinema and what it takes to create something that has an iconic element to it, because he's done that himself many times.
What would you say is the most, I was going to ask you, what was the most surprising part about your interactions with him? That was really my questions. When you sort of sit down with that, I think you probably have an expectation of what it is. What was the most surprising part?
I guess just how knowledgeable he was. I mean, like really, really is a super, super, super fan. So definitely that. But also, he really, when I read the script, I was so impressed by how it is completely different and completely still an X-File.
Wow.
And that's quite a hard thing to pull off, as you can imagine. So I was really impressed by that. And he just understands how to turn, how to turn what's on the page into the best version of itself. And those two things don't necessarily always exist together. And so he's a force to be reckoned with.
Well, that brings me to my last question, which is about Jane, in the sense that obviously maybe you had some expectations coming into this shoot. What was the most surprising thing when y'all wrapped?
I think that their relationship with Eric, our DP, and the degree to which they had visualized, as one would imagine, but doesn't always take place, no matter how much one is a cinephile or loves or is immersed themselves into the genre of filmmaking. What Jane and Eric did was, they knew what they wanted every single millisecond. It was already manifested in their minds what they were after in every frame. And because of that, there was such a sense, a heightened sense of creativity and joy and exploration, and because it almost already existed, because they thought about it so much, and there were drawings, there were animation, there were this, and that we were being invited to step into something that was already moving. It was almost like a train that was moving, and we were just kind of slotting into these different cars along the way. And so very much we're on that journey with them, which I'd never really experienced before quite in that way. And I feel very honored to have been able to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible to watch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.